Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I know a few of you, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Betty Marie. I am imported and blown in yellow belly to the Republic of Cork, but I was very fortunate of having known Grania since 1975. We actually started our ballet career together, which I know you might find extraordinary. It's very ironic that we should be in a sporting club, because at school Grania and I were notorious for the two that were bound to be found anywhere except anything to do with sport, so we had that in common. We were the only two Latin scholars in our year, and I spent the last couple of days since this sad occasion to touch base with some of our teachers from when we were at school together in Grania in the centre of South Africa. And I found it has been a very reflective part, because I've never actually asked teachers as to what their engagement or their thoughts were, firstly on Grania and our engagement together. And I was told by our Latin teacher that when the two of us were together, which I think a lot of you would attest to as well, that Grania found me very frustrating at the best of times, because Grania was a very focused, very passionate woman and took what she did very seriously, whatever it was that she did, whereas I would have been somebody who would be more interested in how Asterix was translated into Latin and Dominatrix got its name. So my history with Grania and the points that were in common was always that we were, and especially on reflecting as we do in these times, was difference. Was that the road and the route that we take sometimes of not falling into the norm leads us in a way that sometimes is not understood by everybody. But nonetheless, one thing that over the last 2 weeks has become very clear is that Grania was very much loved very often in a way that she might not have even have recognized. So I'm going to just kind of guide the day together. That's just to put me in context with how I fit into this picture. So we're going to proceed, and the first person I'm going to ask to say a few words, and by way of introduction, Grania, or G1 as she was called, has two sisters, and she has Gunda, if you haven't met Gunda there, G2, and Gisela, G3. And ironically, I can remember Gisela from before she was born, because the first time I actually saw her mother was when she was pregnant, coming to fetch us at a ballet class. So that's my first memory. So I'm going to ask Gisela on behalf of the family just to say a few words.
Firstly, I just want to thank you all for being here. I think we are an interesting bunch of misfits here this evening. But it's been really a good evening so far, getting to speak to a few of you, and unanimously, whilst maybe a lot of you haven't known her very well, there's a common thread, and she really did have an impact on a lot of people, and thank you for being here. It's really meaningful. So there are many moments in your life that remain emblazoned on your brain forever. That phone call on the 16th of June 2019. It was 9:45 p.m. in South Africa, and I was returning home from watching Rocketman at the cinema. I had been enthralled. What a story, what a wildly talented and complicated life. Grania had been responsible for my love for Elton John, among others. One always knows when that phone call comes, because everything about it is out of place. In a single breath, you prepare yourself for the news that you already know before the words are uttered. But nothing can prepare you. Adrenaline took over as I felt the blood draining from my face. I started to shake, my brain turned to mush, and I struggled to breathe. What came next was the surreal disbelief of the information I just received, with a simultaneous sense of loss so enormous. I felt the absence of Grania from the world, a piece of my heart forever lost. She had, on this earth, such a massive energy, yet managed to take up such a small space with it. I was her baby sister. And she had been so much more than a sister to me. Being almost 10 years my senior, she was like my second mother, my mentor, my safe space, my reason, my encyclopedia, my ally during parental battles, my confidant, my go-to when the world became too crazy. She was my person. She challenged my thinking always. We didn't always agree. Growing up with Grania, she was my best friend. When she was home between university and jobs, because I was that much younger than her, we would share our love for drawing, reading, our pets. They had all been dragged home by me, but adopted by her. The Royal Shakespearean Company. She was a big Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson fan. Freddie Mercury. Exchanging books at the local library. Makeup. She had expensive taste. Movies, sitting outside under the jacaranda tree, nattering, watching the Karoo sun sit behind those familiar mountains. Cigarettes, and of course, her wickedly dry sense of humour. After Grania left for Ireland, I missed my sister terribly. Our lives had taken such different turns. And as is the way with long distance, and life getting in the way, our communication was less frequent than I would have liked. I last saw Grania during her last visit home in 2008, 11 years ago. A lifetime ago, it feels like. Our last Skypes and emails were typical of two sisters who adored each other, loving, supporting, challenging, as always, the status quo, and with the usual promises of chat soon. Our last conversation was in December of 2012. Unbeknownst to the world, Grania had begun to suffer from the invisible disease of depression and loneliness. Over the next few years, she would isolate herself from everyone who loved her. Sisters, father, mother, friends, colleagues. Emails remained unopened. Calls never answered. Messages unread. She withdrew herself and blocked the living world out. We never stopped trying to reach her. Our father never gave up hope that his firstborn would write home. He died in 2017, never having reached her. It appears that my sister swapped out the shortcomings of the real world, meat space, she called it, in favor of one that she could control, a virtual world crafted by herself. Here she also kept her few remaining friends in the world, online, always virtual. And here she shared the best of herself, her genius, her critical questioning of the world, made cyber friends, influenced people, and it would appear was loved and respected by many for her brilliant mind and fantastic dry humour. Gunda and I travelled here from South Africa last Friday to settle my sister's affairs, but also to find some answers. We don't know yet how she died, but we do know how she lived, the juxtaposition of her two worlds. She was perhaps the loneliest person in Cork. There is an emptiness in my heart that I know I will learn to bear until only the happy memories prevail. Goodbye, my beautiful sister. You are loved, abundant, and thank you for walking part of your journey here with me.
Cheers. I'll say it in the South African way. Cheers, eh?
Cheers, Grania.
Yes, Gisela just touched on it. One of the things that Grania taught me was the language of English and the appreciation of English. I have a little bit of a funny background in a time when my home language would be Afrikaans, and when I was 12 years old, which is when I reconnected with Grania the next time, the first time in schooling, was when I said something disparaging about the English, and my father said, enough, you're now going to the English school, which in those days was like putting a Protestant child in a Catholic school. But that's neither here nor there. But I could barely speak any English. And Grania introduced me to a few easy, as she called it, English people. One of the few things is the wit. Again, my sense of humour was not, it was honed by my father, Goon Show, Harry Sickham, all those, Spike Milligan, the whole shebang. And she introduced me to Terry Pratchett. She introduced me to Oscar Wilde. And those few moments where we was less selfish and absorbed in our own times, and anybody that cared, is the one common thread as well, was curiosity. In a time in South Africa where the status quo might not have been what we would have adhered to, this would have been where we would have had those connections where we asked a few questions. That leads automatically into the curiosity that I had with Catholicism, even there as a Calvinist, ex-Calvinist. So it's very appropriate, Michael, if I may introduce to you, Michael Nugent from Atheist Island.
Thank you. Well, this is very sad, really. I should say that calling yourselves G1 and G2 and G3 is appropriately science fiction-y, I think.
It suits.
Yeah, that's right. Is there an R2D2 somewhere? But I mean, it is one of the things that I do remember most about Grania is this whole Star Trek role-playing games, computer games. She was really into that whole science fiction world, but she was also just a voracious reader generally, and as well as promoting atheism and secularism and separation of church and state, which is what we do within Atheist Ireland. You know, she was also able to articulate the problems in a whole range of sort of challenging pseudoscience, and she had such a breadth of knowledge that she could just draw on without having to check or having to look up something in a conversation. And when she was debating things online, you know, because Atheist Ireland, for perspective, evolved out of an online discussion forum called atheist.ie, and Grania was one of the key people in that, and inevitably, if anyone would enter an argument with her, they would lose. There was you're probably familiar with Theodore Roosevelt's statement, his foreign policy position of speak softly, carry a big stick. Our variation of that for Grania was speak softly and carry a big brain. And she was very softly spoken, but she was very authoritative, you know, when she was making various arguments. She was one of the key people that evolved Atheist Ireland from being just an online discussion forum into being a real-life advocacy group that campaigns to promote not only atheism, but also separation of church and state. And she helped to, she was the first secretary of the organisation. She helped to put our constitution together. She helped us in terms of, she was a key person involved with developing our policy positions, lobbying politicians. And when Atheist Ireland in 2010 maybe became the first Irish atheist organisation and the first explicitly atheist European atheist organisation to meet with the presidents of the European Commission, European Parliament and European Union, Grania and I were the two delegates at that meeting, and she was you know, a very important contributor to that. And then she also knew where the best places to get ice cream in Brussels were. No idea where she could have that out, but knew exactly where to go when we came out. So I think that her involvement in Atheist Ireland was very, very important in terms of what has evolved into an organisation that has been central to a lot of political change. Most recently, one of her main personal political objectives, which was removing the law against blasphemy in Ireland, which we finally did with a referendum recently. So although I'm obviously sorry that she's gone, glad that she was around long enough to see that happen, because that was one of the things that was very important to her. Now, around, and it's interesting that you're saying 2012, because it was around that time as well that she withdrew from Atheist Ireland's activities, and she said she wanted to focus on other things, and from then on she kind of was conducting most of her advocacy and her scientific analysis and rational analysis online rather than in real life. Like, I would sometimes meet her if I was coming down to Cork. I'd contact her and say, "Do you want to meet for lunch?" Sometimes we'd meet, sometimes she wouldn't even reply to the emails, you know. So it's but when we did know, she did seem you know, okay whenever would be meeting her. But she did then transfer, and this is what I'm going to read to you now. She transferred most of her online promotion of atheism and reason into a friendship with Jerry Coyne, who runs a website called Why Evolution is True, and also a book of the same name, and various other publications. Jerry's website is one of the most significant ones in the atheist and rational movement internationally, and Grania became a key part in that, writing articles for it and helping Jerry to run the site. So Jerry has sent over a few words that he's asked me to say on his behalf. So I'll read this. So from here on in, this is Jerry Coyne's words. Vale Grania. I'm not sure whether, I didn't know Grania did Latin, so I'm not sure whether she would have preferred the classical Latin or the modern Latin pronunciation, but we'll go with Vale because that's Jerry's preferred one. I knew Grania for 8 years and talked to her almost every day when I wasn't travelling, but we never met. We talked on Skype or in the early days on the phone, and that way became fast friends, e-friends. Somehow I never got to Cork and she never visited America, staying put in Ireland after she moved there from South Africa 2 decades ago. I can't even remember how we met. It must have been when I noticed a smart and witty person making comments on my website and wanted to see who it was. I must have initiated email contact with her. And as these things go, that turned into a cyber relationship and then a cyber friendship. I soon learned that Grania helped to start Atheist Ireland and was deeply concerned with critical thinking and human rights, especially abortion rights and blasphemy laws. She moderated and participated in many online forums. She was, in other words, largely a denizen of the internet. And so I asked her if she wouldn't mind participating in my own nascent website, writing the occasional post and acting as an advisor and confidant. To my delight, she agreed. As she used to say, Jerry gave me the keys to his website, and she used them often and judiciously, making an enormous contribution to Why Evolution is True. Her posts, full of compassion and wit, inspired my readers, and I simply cannot fill the vacuum left by her absence, either in my life or on my website. I was the last person to talk to her. She told me on Wednesday, June the 12th, that she had severe stomach pains. By Friday, they hadn't gone away, and I began urging her to go to the doctor. Instead, she went to the pharmacist for ibuprofen. On Saturday, she told me on Skype that every cell in my body hurts, and I immediately began seriously harassing her to seek medical help. But Grania was stubborn and disliked doctors. Indeed, her stubbornness was one of her endearing qualities. How I remember our long arguments about politics, but in this case, it was unwise. She did relent, though, promising me on Saturday that she'd go to the clinic the next day if she wasn't better. As I was leaving for Hawaii on Sunday, I emailed her from the airport. "Are you going to the doctor today as you promised?" with the last 3 words in capital letters. When I landed in Hawaii, I read her response, "Yes, I'm on her way." She never made it. She had collapsed and died at the door of the clinic. I may never learn what did her in, but it doesn't really matter. She is gone, and there is a Grania-shaped hole in my existence. I will never Skype her again, never be able to ask for her advice, never be able to kvetch about my own loneliness or problems with my love life, never have her console me when I'm depressed or ill. Grania had enormous reserves of wisdom, humour and empathy. And I think my readers sensed that, at least judging from the 350 comments left on my website when I reported her death. Grania was pretty much of a loner, but it was by choice. She preferred her video games to dealing with people she didn't care for. She might have echoed the words of writer A.G. Liebling, who said of his youth, "In Paris I was often alone but seldom lonely. Those who became her friends should count themselves lucky." It's sad that I'll never get to meet her. We would have had a good time, and a bibulous one. There will be no meeting in the hereafter either, as we were both die-hard atheists and had no illusions about the finality of our extinction. But I envy those who knew Grania in neat space, as she'd say, and could experience her company in person. She left us way too soon, but she touched many lives, always for the better. So those are Jerry Coyne's words. And I would add to that, in terms of touching many lives, all for the better, that it's not just those of us who knew her. She helped to change Ireland.
She did.
And that, that's I think what she should be remembered for as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
From arriving in English school and being introduced to the English language, and with our common sense of the hatred of all things sport or exercise, which was compulsory, by the way, as you do, the only way you could get out of sport was by being a culture vulture, or a nerd, as it was called in the 80s. And Grania and I took to this like ducks to water, and we engaged in all forms of theatrics. We were in the drama society, the debating society. We were in anything that would keep us off a sports field and a pitch, or anything. That was our common bond at that stage. We also had a common music teacher. His name was Leon Fouchier. And again, there was a common pattern. Grania would be very diligent in music, although she didn't take piano forte for as long as I might have. I think she stopped before she finished school. But somewhere in his madness, Leon Fouchier got it in his head that we need to do a variety concert, and that Grania and I had to be part of an act joined by a third lady, who was a very sporty woman, also 6 foot tall, by the name of Suzanne van der Merwe. And so was introduced to our school the infamous, for a few shows, Union High's version of the Andrew Sisters. Now, being Atheist Island, the song that we sang was Whispering Heights. So, soft as the voice of an angel. If you've never heard Grania sing, she was vibratoing with us, okay, and it was great comedy. And to have seen Grania in costume, and as Grania and Suzanne phoned me during the week, and she said she didn't want to put something on a public blog, but she wanted to share this with me because her memory was always of Grania, not really engaged, but the first time she saw Grania as a human being and part of a gang was when she was part of that threesome, and we had so much fun in costumes and reading this act.
You were in costumes.
We were in costumes. That explains a lot. Yes. So when you immigrate, and that was part of our teenage years and in our high school. So when you immigrate, and she immigrated a year or so before me, when you immigrate, personally, and I think, seeing we're discussing these things of loneliness, it's a lonely space that you fill to go to a new country. And especially when it's a different culture. The language might be the same, but the culture is different. And when you do that, I call all my Irish family my adopted family. Grania was very fortunate that she had what I never had the pleasure of knowing really well in our hometown, but I can remember them arriving in my hometown and us having quiet whispers about the exotic Moffats that have arrived in town. What made them exotic was they were just gregarious, and Madame Gregarity in front of us here, front and foremost, but that was my memory of the Moffats. I never really got to know them really well, but you know, it's a small town we got. Grania had the fortune to move to Cork and have her adopted family coming and being part of what was in South Africa and have that link. And with that in mind, I'd now like to ask Kat to say a few words, please.
So just to explain, I'm one of the Moffats. Grania was an older sister to me. My oldest sister is actually here, but Grania was like our older sister. I'm not going to say a whole lot from me. I've got a few comments from Jerry's page because I wanted to bring the online world in, because meat space is here, but cyberspace needs to come in too. So I'll start. I never know what to write, and now especially I do struggle. Words were never my forte, but they were Grania's. She always knew how to make you think deeper about life, whether it was simply about a morrow in Tomod, who to marry in Stardew Valley, or something in real life. Everything she did had a deeper meaning behind it. It's as though she saw through different lenses to the rest of us. And on occasion, she did share with us glimpses of the world that she saw. For me, it was through our 4 a.m. musings on various games, the universe and life and love, and often Pokemon. It was a jumbled mess of philosophical gibberish that will stick with me forever. And something struck me about Grania dying, the way in which she had ultimately left us all behind so many years before in the real world. Yet she had a flourishing online life. She touched thousands of people every day and week through Jerry's website, for one of the places. She was involved in many online forums and wrote plenty of articles as well. On Jerry's page, there were over 350 comments following her death. There has been an absolute outcry from the Why Evolution is True community, some of which I'm going to read out to you today. Just 5, so not 350. So the first one is by Andy Thompson, and it simply states, 60,000 people lost a friend today. History, politics, science, informative tweets you'd otherwise miss, and much more were the staple of Grania Spingies' contributions to this website. Gone too soon. The next one is from Sastra, if I'm pronouncing it right. Grania was an absolute treasure and joy. We were lucky to know her. I was going to put the word "know" in quotes, because we knew her only through the internet. But I think we are often more our real selves online than otherwise. She was as real as it gets, certainly to me. I miss her already. Eric wrote, she contributed immensely to many other people's joy and understanding of this world, and left it a better place than it was before, which is the best form of immortality. I don't know how to pronounce this, but I'm going to give it a shot. J.B. Lilly, I think, wrote, she certainly brought light and wit and sense in abundance. She is sorely missed. And then this is a combination of two people's comments. One a reply to the other one's comment. But it's Bill Morrison, who stated, I corresponded with Grania a couple of years ago about her family name's origin. Spingies is a surname secondarily German, but originally Lithuanian, in the form Spingis. A related word is spindagimas, a noun meaning shine, radiance and brilliance. Another is spinxetti, to glimmer or to twinkle as would a star. The news about her was so shocking. And the reply says, someone else said that Grania means love. Love shines.
The last time I saw Grania in Meat Space was in 1998 or 1999, and I cannot be exactly sure of the time. She had left our hometown and she had returned, and we connected on a whole different level. And we had a hoolie, and my God, we had a house party. And all I remember is we started at the swimming pool, and it went from the swimming pool into the living room, as only us South Africans can. And I do know that musical theatre, everything, and the kitchen sink was thrown around at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I remember looking at Grania through a haze of whatever it was and thinking, my God, where did I miss this woman that could party the absolutely under the table? Where has she been all my life? Even though she'd been right there all the time, we just never got to see that part of her. and she shortly after that left for Ireland. I'm now going to ask Nicola Moffat to do the eulogy. Nicola?
Grania was the big sister that I never had. She was in many ways a better big sister to my sister Kat than I ever was. And one of the greatest qualities was her ability to talk to us as though we were on the same intellectual level as her, even at 9 years and at 15 years of age. She was one of the most intelligent people I have ever met, and she graced us with her knowledge without condescension, but with plenty of wit. When she arrived in Cork in 1998, she brought with her a large and heavy ceramic elephant that her students in KwaZulu-Natal had gifted her. It was a bloody awful thing, but I think that it spoke of a heart bigger than her body could contain.
It weighed a ton.
I know. The students she taught were extremely poor, and they faced a future of almost certain penury. Yet they all pitched in to give her this gift. She was so touched by this gesture that she schlepped the bloody thing all the way to Ireland. She touched so many people, and that has been made so evident by the many loving messages left by people from all over the world. But the Grania I knew was also very ill. In about 2012, she started becoming reclusive, evading invitations, leaving her phone unanswered. For her family in South Africa, her continued silence became more and more alarming, and over the months and years of sporadic interaction, they would ring my family looking for answers we couldn't give them because we didn't have them ourselves. Her father wrote to her without fail every week until he died in 2017. He died not knowing why his beloved eldest daughter wouldn't return his messages, which towards the end became more frantic for answers that I think she didn't know how to give him. And now she has died, and we are still without answers. Her choice to live in seclusion has meant that in many ways I have been grieving Grania's loss for many, many years. While she was in contact with people she had never physically met on a daily basis, Grania's presence in my life and in my family's and her family's lives became more and more erratic. I last saw her a little over 2 years ago while I was organising the Cork March for Choice. I was gladdened and proud to hear that she too had been working behind the scenes to rid Ireland of the barbaric Eighth Amendment, and I told her as much. I also told her that I missed her. She cried when I said that. In a perverse way, I take a little comfort in that because it meant that her avoidance of me wasn't symptomatic of rejection, but rather meant that she loved me very much. I think she just didn't know how to pull herself out of the hole in which she found herself. I wish so much that I could tell her this, that there was some vestige of a spirit to whom I could say, "It's okay, I understand, and I never stopped loving you." Of course, the idea of a spirit or a soul goes very much against what Grania believed. Excuse me. Belief is not exactly the right concept I'm looking for, because the very idea of a belief in something with no empirical evidence not only made her skeptical, but made her very worried. This is not without due cause when we consider humankind's shocking record for using belief as a justification for brutality. She interrogated the dominant narratives that normalize this brutality, and my conversations with her were often centered on a critical dissection of such narratives. I think that I probably owe the fact that I later pursued a PhD to these conversations. Grania taught me not to accept anything at face value, to poke holes in claims at logical reasoning, to question anything that styles itself as authority. But as serious as she was, Grania was also so much fun to be around. She had decidedly eclectic taste in music, and we would burn CDs for each other and dance around the kitchen in my parents' home in Cloyne. She was very, very funny, and although her wit was often acerbic, it never missed a beat. She spent a lot of her time gaming. In fact, for a long time, her Twitter bio identified her as a godless gaming geek. Her favourite games were RPGs, role-playing games for those who don't speak, especially Bethesda games as Elder Scrolls series and Fallout. The games allowed her, I think, in many ways, to build her ideal self and her ideal world, which more often than not included a canine companion. And she had a great love for animals, especially dogs, and she pined terribly for her German Shepherd Frodo, who she had to leave behind in Graffernet. It breaks my heart to think that if she had had a dog, perhaps she would have been saved the deep and downward spiral of her later years. I'm going to close with a poem I wrote, because I think that sometimes saying less says so much more. Perhaps we wouldn't be here today if we had understood her deep and profound silence. Grania, this is for you. I love you so very much. Her 49th birthday. On your 49th birthday, it rained all day. Sheets of water bathed the river trees, who could only bow and sway in supplication to a sky that couldn't contain its loss. The river forgot itself amongst the ancient roots, grabbing at pebbles to gain a foothold it couldn't find, and on it rained. On your 49th birthday, we sat a coven, circleted sisters summoned to perform the last ritual. Papers strewn flooded the kitchen floor with Carew dust, with the parched tears of your father's letters ripped and shredded amongst the mire of unopened bills, photographs, newspaper clippings, and receipts from Marks and Spencer's. On your 49th birthday, we took a quiet roast and began our ministrations when the plates were cleared. We ate Madeira cake and donuts and found amongst the wreckage 2 birthday candles, the kind every mother's kitchen kept in Graffernet. We left them unburned for the day that was in it. On your 49th birthday, you were already cold, and the edges of your mouth had turned blue. But in a pixelated world, somewhere on the edge of view, you walk with wolves, and dragons take flight towards cerulean skies.
Now I like Susan. Susan Tap.
The last time I had contact with Grania was via Facebook in January 2013. 2013 would have been our 25th school reunion. I'd like to think that by taking you on a short timeline today of my connections with Grania over the last 40-something odd years, that the comments and the commentary that went on between us was, are you going to the 25th school reunion? Jesus, I didn't want to be there 25 years ago. And please, I do note that the word Jesus in Ireland is one of our favourite expressions, and it was used often. But she and I agreed, and that was our last comment, that why would we go and travel across the world to go to something that we felt so disconnected to? Yet, we are soon to celebrate another school reunion, and with the wonders of modern technology, we now have a WhatsApp group. So when the news broke of Grania's passing, only the second of our classmates to have passed since we left school, we posted the link to what Jerry had written, and there were a lot of comments from classmates and whatever, but I would like to quote one girl, because I think it's not only relevant to the time past, but also maybe for us in the here and now, in this meet space, for us to be cognizant of life and those around us. And what Kim wrote was, after reading that, wow, she lives The lives we live side by side all around the world, some so familiar to us as to be our own, and others so foreign, so terribly sad. Kind of wish I'd known better all these years. And in conclusion, I'm going to end this, if I may, with a classic. But I think it speaks to everything. I'm going to go back to the words of Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. And sorry I could not travel both and be one traveller. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no stepped had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. We are going to take a lot of what has happened and Grania past and to this moment on board, and we would just like to note that we are going to put a project together. We are going to ask for help over time, and we would like to, whether it be mental health, seclusion, all that with the Moffat family and us, we are going to see if we can take Grania's legacy, and whether it be online in a presence, and maybe look at the different way of looking at mental health, engagement, and just empathy, kindness, and so if we can call it a night. Thank you very much everybody on behalf of everybody for coming, and I hope that everything you heard and everything that you will remember about tonight is that we are in the here and now, we only have today, and just be kind and loving to each other because it means so much. Thank you.